On this exact point of the world's longest mountain range, 52 years ago today, a plane collided directly with a mountain, leading to a bewildering incident. The astonishing fact was that, immediately after the collision, the plane disappeared. The 8,900-kilometer-long South American Andes mountain range, where peaks rise to an altitude of 15,000 feet, offers nothing but cold and silence. For many days, authorities found no wreckage or any dead bodies. Consequently, they announced the cessation of search operations. In the following days, discussions about the plane crash continued in the news media. After some time, when no evidence of passengers or wreckage emerged, it became clear that no survivors would be found. Hence, authorities decided to halt the search operation permanently. The news media continued to cover the stories of the plane crash for a few more days, but gradually, everything returned to normal. People had seemingly forgotten about the incident. However, around 2.5 months after the crash, exactly 72 days later, authorities received a message from the missing plane. In a jaw-dropping revelation, the Uruguay Airways Flight 571 emerged, rewriting its name in history. On October 12, 1972, this flight took off from Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, with rugby players on board who were scheduled to play a match in Santiago, the capital of Chile. The pilot's plan was to spend the night in Mendoza and then proceed to cross the Andes the next day, as it was deemed safer due to the dangerous Andes mountain range standing between Argentina and Chile. These mountains are not only extremely treacherous but also challenging to traverse, especially in adverse weather conditions. The original plan was for the plane to land in Mendoza, Argentina, for an overnight stay, and then, once the weather cleared, cross the Andes Mountains and land in Santiago, Chile. Little did they know that the next day they would face a catastrophe. On October 13th, Flight 571 took off from Mendoza, and if you look at the map, the distance between Mendoza and Santiago is only about 180 kilometers. However, within these 180 kilometers lies the 15,000 feet high peaks of the Andes, making the flight's route challenging. The flight had successfully completed nearly 50 flights on a similar route. Confident in their abilities, the crew took off from Mendoza, heading south. During the altitude gain, the pilot noticed a thick layer of clouds obscuring the view below. The pilot contacted the control tower, which would guide them using radar signals and radio communication. Apart from the control tower, there's another method pilots can use to estimate their location. By keeping track of the last known location and calculating their current position based on the aircraft's speed, they can have an approximate idea of their location. As Flight 571 approached Planchon Pass, the pilot initiated a right turn. The aircraft was passing over the Andes Mountains at an altitude of 18,000 feet. The pilot expected to pass Planchon Pass, make a turn towards Andes, cross these dangerous peaks, and then turn towards Santiago to land. Flight 571's pilot had successfully completed about 50 flights on this route before, so he had confidence in his abilities. However, when they approached Planchon Pass, they disappeared from the radar of Santiago Control Tower. Initially, this was not a cause for concern because the radar signals were weak due to the mountains. At this point, the crew, who were dependent on the Santiago Control Tower for information, was unaware that they had already crossed Planchon Pass. Instead, they believed they were still over the Cordón del Plata, further to the south. The situation became more complicated as the crew had initiated a descent. The tower, lacking radar information and unaware of the actual situation, granted permission for the descent. Unbeknownst to them, the pilot had miscalculated the aircraft's location, thinking they were still above Argentina, but they were, in fact, crossing Planchon Pass. When the aircraft appeared to Santiago Control Tower once again near Planchon Pass, the tower noticed a significant deviation. In the midst of this confusion, the aircraft was gradually descending. The pilot started to realize that they were still over the Andes when he saw a massive mountain directly in front of them. At this point, the pilot grasped that they were still in the Andes, not yet above Argentina. The pilot quickly increased altitude in an attempt to clear the mountain, but it was too late. The tail of Flight 571 collided with the peak and separated from the rest of the plane. Now, The aircraft, without a tail and wings, glided into the vast expanse of the Andes, covered in deep snow. The altitude at this crash site was approximately 11,500 feet, and the temperature was around 30 degrees Celsius. The survivors on the crash site were the passengers located in the rear part of the plane as the tail had broken off. Unfortunately, 33 passengers in the front part of the plane, near the fuselage, lost their lives instantly. In a harrowing situation, the survivors faced extreme cold and were surrounded by snow-covered peaks. Initially, they buried the bodies of their companions in the snow. The plane's tail had slid down a large snow slope, and at this point, Flight 571 came to a halt. In the subsequent search operations, which included 4 aircraft from various air forces, no signs of the plane were found. The challenging search operation continued from morning till evening, as the suspected area was difficult to search due to light reflecting off the snow-covered mountains. Ultimately, Uruguay and Argentina both participated in the search. A total of 11 aircraft took part in the operation, searching for Flight 571 throughout the day. However, the difficulty of locating the plane was evident, given the reflective nature of the snow-covered mountains. Despite the extensive search, the crash site of Flight 571 eluded discovery, making this one of the most challenging search operations. As they say, the plane had vanished without a trace. The survivors faced immense challenges in the unforgiving conditions of the Andes. They had no time to waste, as the cold and hunger were their constant companions. Yet the harsh reality of their situation only became apparent when they looked around. The entire landscape was covered in snow, and the only visible features were the snow-covered peaks. In searching here on the crash site, the rescue planes passed over the surviving passengers several times. Despite signaling with gestures, the rescue planes couldn't spot them. Later, they found a lipstick in one of the luggage bags. With it, they wrote large SOS on the snow over the fuselage. Despite their efforts, the rescue planes still couldn't see them. After running search operations for a total of 11 days, on October 21st, 1972, all passengers were declared dead. On the 11th day, present at the crash site, they found a radio in the cockpit. They tuned it and heard the news that the search operation to find them had been stopped. The survivors, already in such difficulty, were deeply saddened by this news. Their last hope of being found alive had vanished. The situation worsened in the first week, and 5 more passengers died due to injuries. With no sign of rescue and facing starvation, they survived on limited supplies. After exhausting their food, they began consuming clothing and leather from the seats for sustenance. In this dire situation, their bodies weakened, and survival became increasingly challenging. Unable to find any energy source in the Andes, and with the crash site above them making descent impossible, the survivors resorted to consuming the remains of their deceased companions. The decision was excruciating, but hunger, thirst, and weakness forced them to take this desperate step. On October 29th, after 17 days of the crash, an avalanche suddenly hit, burying the fuselage in snow. 9 survivors died, and 19 remaining individuals with injuries created a space by removing snow and using the plane's fuselage as protection against the cold. They improvised glasses by cutting the cockpit's plastic visor and fashioned snowshoes from seat cushions. By this time, they had only 8 chocolate bars, 3 jars of jam, some dried fruits, and selected water bottles for sustenance. Initially, they struggled to divide and ration the food among themselves, but when everything was exhausted, they resorted to boiling leather and cotton from the plane's seats to consume. In the absence of any signs of help, and with no feasible way to descend from the crash site's high altitude, the survivors faced a grim reality. Starvation and lack of energy were taking a toll on their bodies. In desperation, they started consuming the body parts of their deceased companions. The decision was extremely difficult, but hunger, thirst, and weakness left them with no other choice. On December 12, 1972, after 3 rugby players, Parado, Canessa, and Vizintin, decided to hike towards the western peak in the hope of finding a valley on the other side. This was an arduous journey without professional gear, and the temperature dropped to 30 degrees Celsius. They wrapped sleeping bags made from their hands and warm fabric cut from the plane's seats and started the trek. After 3 continuous days of hiking, they finally reached the top of the mountain, only to find that the other side was also covered in snow. There was no sign of greenery or any indication of life. Facing a shortage of both food and hope, one of them returned to the crash site. Parado and Canessa continued downhill, navigating through difficult terrain, and after 61 kilometers of struggling in poor conditions, they finally reached a valley. The situation was dire and their health deteriorated. One by one, the survivors succumbed to the harsh conditions, and by December 27, 1972, 72 days after the crash, only 3 survivors remained. Rescue helicopters reached the crash site, and Parado and Canessa's incredible survival story became known to the world. The memorial, erected at the crash site, serves as a reminder of human resilience in the face of adversity. It stands as a testament to the belief that with unwavering determination, even the most significant challenges can be overcome. We hope you will like and share this video filled with your love, and we appreciate your heartfelt comments. Thank you for your continuous support. See you in the next fantastic video.